Well, I'm going to welcome everybody here. I think we're live, so welcome. We're trying to get a connection to Jarvis and the San Quentin prison in California, and we're having a little bit of a trouble. But I will start with just introducing ourselves. So my name is Ingela Flatin, and I translated David Sheff's book, The Buddhist on Death Row, into Norwegian. And tonight we hope to have Jarvis with us, Jarvis Jay Masters. The book is about his life. And the author, David Sheff, is joining us for sure from California. So if Jarvis comes in, we will tell you he's going to be calling in with the prison telephone, and the prison telephone, it will every 3 minutes or so they will tell us, there will be a message, an automated message telling us that the phone call is being monitored. So just be patient. This is his life. This is the way it goes. And every 15 minutes, his call will be cut, and he will have to call back in again. So this is how it's going to go for about 1 hour. He's with us for at least 1 hour. So David and I and Jarvis will talk for the first 45 minutes. But please, you can send in questions, because we might take in questions anytime. But for sure, the last 30 minutes, we will have questions from the audience. The other thing I would like to say, since we hadn't planned this very well when it comes to the intro, because we were planning it would be Flux doing the introduction, but now I will do it on behalf of Flux. And I want to tell you a little bit about Flux, the publishing house, because it's very interesting how they picked up this book. Flux is doing a lot of dialogue meetings in Norwegian prisons, and I think this is how they in this process they got hold of this title, and they wanted to translate it into Norwegian. So their mission is to inspire new thoughts and good deeds. And these dialogue groups in Norwegian prisons, one of the themes there is to discuss what punishment and justice, the concepts. What does it mean? What is justice, and what is punishment? So it's Flux's mission is in many ways to find new ways of elevating consciousness and contributing to change. So I just want to give you that background information about the publishing house in itself. It's very fascinating this is our first live event, actually. So it's great that you could join us. Maybe you're joining us after the fact, but because we're recording this. So now let's see. I'm going to try to get a hold of David now. David, are you there?
I am, and thank you. And thank you to Flux for doing this. It's an extraordinary opportunity for me to talk about, my friend and who's been on death row for 35 years, who's innocent of a crime, but he was framed, and he's been suffering in this prison for that long. He also is one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. He's taught me so much. He's a Buddhist teacher. He's written books, including Finding Freedom and That Bird Has My Wings, that had an enormous impact around the country, around the States, but also around the world, inspiring young people. And in the meantime, he's doing all this from the circumstance that none of us can imagine what it's been like to be deprived of your freedom. He's been in prison longer than he ever was out of prison, and this has defined his life. So it's incomprehensible, I think, for me, and I think for most of us to know what he's gone through. And yet, Jarvis's spirit is remarkable. He has a great group of followers who are trying to help him prove that he's innocent, and to try to get him out of there. And Jarvis's ability to communicate with the outside world, of course, as anybody in prison, is controlled by the prison system. So the idea that he now, for something like today, requests access to the prison's phone system, and was able to get the prison's phone system. And as you said, Ingela, the way it's monitored and interrupted frequently. But in the meantime, it's really exciting for me to be able to, I think we should all try to imagine what's happening right now, which is people in Norway are listening and having a conversation with a man who is living inside virtually a box, a small cage inside one of America's most notorious prisons. So Jarvis, welcome. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, and this is Ingela is our host, as you know, and I'm going to let you guys talk, and I'm here
Yes.
to chime in.
Great. Jarvis, I would like to tell you that we're just two people in addition to you, so we don't have that big group of people now. So it's only me and David and you.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being available today. And could you start by telling how is it where you are right now? Where are you sitting, and what do you see around you?
Right now, I'm in a cell. It's about 9x4 size. Usually, it's unusually quiet right now, but there's 40 or 50 people all condemned to die on this particular tier. It's a tier that, that creates his own environment, his own little cage that everyone speaks out of. And sometimes it's real loud, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you can feel that people are really into their own beings and trying to develop some ideas about how they're going to cope one more day. Every so.
What Ingela asked is if I would sum up really, your story, where you're from and how you got where you are in this like lovely spot where you're happy to have lived for the last 35 years. But rather than me do it, you could probably tell your life story better than I can. So would you mind?
No, I think you wrote it. I think you wrote an excellent piece. Wrote an excellent book. I mean, I'm so impressed by your writing and what you've been able to do, and I, like every time we talk on a program or something, I always acknowledge your writing and your truthfulness about my life and all that it meant to me to see in your book my life story. So go ahead, start it off.
Well, what I'll say, I'm not gonna let you off the hook that easily, but before you do that, what I will say is, we're thrilled, by the way, Jarvis and I both are thrilled that Flux has published the book and translated it into Norwegian. And so it's available for an audience, Norwegian speaking audience, because it's important to us for many reasons to get the story out. First of all, I believe that it's a story that can help people in their own lives. It's not, you don't have to be a Buddhist. You could be religious or not religious, it doesn't matter. But Jarvis's experience, his spiritual journey, surviving on death row and what he's learned is part of what the story is about. And it's also partly what he's written about himself. He's written about it in his own books, That Bird Has My Wings and Finding Freedom. But the other part of it is something that is really probably significant, given that we're talking to you in Oslo and in Norway, is that America is one of the very few countries. So supposedly America is considered a first world country, progressive country, and yet we're one of the very few countries that allows people to be executed for crimes, and in many cases, sometimes, of course, crimes they did commit, but in many cases, horrifically, crimes they didn't commit. And so the idea of talking to an audience who lives in a country that is progressive enough to abolish the death penalty. I don't know if you knew that, Jarvis, that Norway has no death penalty. Jarvis had a background that really led him to where he is. He was in a system and in a country that is so polarized and so divided that people without resources are so much more likely, and people who both are poor, people who are black, we know this, are much more likely to end up in the criminal justice system and end up in prison, and indeed end up on death row. Jarvis committed some crimes when he was young. He owned up to it. He served his time for it. But while he was in prison, there was another crime that committed, the murder of a guard by the organization within the prison. Jarvis was framed for this crime and sentenced to death, and his life has been on death row since then. And if Jarvis had had resources to hire good lawyers, to have the representation that anybody should have, he wouldn't be there, because his case against him is fraught. It is appalling that he was convicted of this murder and sentenced to death. But it shows where we are. The one good, hopeful news is that Jarvis now has a new team of lawyers for the first time after 35 years, who are the equivalent of a dream team of lawyers who we believe very strongly will finally get just exonerated. And we cannot wait to celebrate the day that he walks out of death row and out of San Quentin. So Jarvis, keep going. What did I miss there? You want to talk about, just what it was like to be a kid, talk a little bit about your neighborhood, and then, your entry to the prison, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, I would do that. But the first thing I would like to just say is that, I was thinking about how I can talk about what got me on death row in the most fastest way so we can all save some time. I think it all comes down to me being 22 years old, and some guy asked me to copy a note for him so that the note won't be in his handwriting. And me being the nosy kid I was, I copied it, and he used it to try to make a deal, using my handwriting to say that I was involved. He wanted to get out of prison, and that was his scheme. And I fell for it. I didn't know what I just copied it because he asked me to do it. And it was that easy for me to end up on death row. And it would be that easy for most kids to end up on death row. So what I do is I let everyone know as many times as I can that, it only takes 1 second, to be one place and another second to be another place. That was an experience that I learned the hard way. And right now I'm trying to make sure that I right that wrong with telling other people, younger people, that that's the case. So that was just one thing I wanted to just get out there so everyone will understand how I end up on death row, and how any person with no money and no access to lawyers can do it. I don't think I had the best lawyers in my trial. Some people would say worse, but I would just say that it was that easy.
Do you know, Ingela, when Norway abolished the death penalty? I think it was in the 70s. Is that right?
It was formally in 1978, I guess, but the last person killed, I think, was 1948 after the Second World War II. It was related to crimes of war. Or so it was, in fact, de facto, it was already over by the 1940s.
Well, I guess. So Jarvis grew up in poverty. His mother was a loving person, but she also had mental illness, and she had a very, very tough time. And she worked as a prostitute. She was addicted to drugs. She was loving and wanted to take care of her children, but couldn't. She just couldn't do it. She ended up, suffering from addiction and other illnesses, and she was in a mental institution for a while. So she did her best, but. So she did her best, but Jarvis ended up with his brothers and sisters being taken from his home, put into the foster care system, separated from the closest people in his life, who were his siblings, his two sisters at that time. And he grew up then in a system. There was a guy in San Quentin that I met who said something profound, which is hurt people hurt people. So he ended up, they put kids like Jarvis into a system. They put people in a system that hurts them from the beginning. He was, it's not an exaggeration to say this young child was tortured by guards, by other kids. In some of these circumstances, Jarvis was forced to fight other kids. He was only 10 years old. The guards would burn them kids with cigarettes, and that's the system in which he grew up. And so when finally he had periods when he was out of that system, it was not a surprise that he connected with people who were, involved in crimes, relatively low-level crimes. But again, without representation, if he'd been a white kid in a wealthy neighborhood and his parents got him a lawyer, he would have got off. He would not have had a record. But because he didn't have that, his record built and built and built until he was finally in LA County Jail, transferred to San Quentin. And again, that's where the murder of this guard occurred.
As you described, was, terrible.
Yeah.
But, there in my own life experience have always seen more worser things happening to other people, other kids that were my age. So I just don't want. I want to include those people too, because they have their stories, and I acknowledge them when I hear them, and I witnessed a lot of that. So there's a lot of us, and a lot of us are the ones who occupy these cells, So I just wanted to add that on, David, because I thought that was important. That we see I see in the faces of other individuals who's been in situations a whole lot worse than I. To me, that's what I recognize as a source of writing, my books, and how I became to write my books. I acknowledge the pain in other people, and we all have that kind of history. Some of us has less, some of us has more. But I just wanted to say that because I thought it was important. So thank you for letting me say that.
Yeah. No, that's so. If I can just sum up, because I think many people have not read your book yet. So as far as I understand, if I remember correctly, you've been in San Quentin for almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
And
40. Actually 40.
40, right. And then 20 of those at least have been in solitary confinement, haven't they?
Yeah, 22 years in solitary confinement. The worst of the worst in San Quentin. So you can imagine San Quentin and then imagine a solitary confinement unit.
Exactly.
It is that. I was in there 22 years. I basically learned how to read and write in that building. I grew up. I became a man inside that building. I went in there at 21 years old, and I didn't come out until, in my 40s, How did I live there? It's hard for me to, give you or anyone or your audience a real clear definition or explanation of how I did it. I know what I did was I spent a lot of time in reflection of who I was and the idea of what I needed to do to survive. And a quick story was that like David was talking about earlier, I hung out with guys, older guys who I thought felt like uncles and brothers and fathers that I never had. And I remember one time getting a visit from my sister, you know, and she asked me how I was doing. I said I was doing well, and I used to always tell her these stories, you know, these prison hardened stories about what goes on and how I became, you know, a part of this and a part of that, and how I was part of the most violent culture in prison. And she looked at me, and she stared at me, and she said, "What about us?" And I said, "What do you mean, but what about us?" And he said, "Look, what about us? Look at your nephew. What about us? What about us? What do we do? You know, what about us? You know, what is it that you do that don't respect us? You know?" And I just teared up because I never thought that I had another family, a real family, who cared about me. And that was a life-changing experience for me, you know, because I knew every time she seen me, it was not about those stories. It was about her coming to say, "You have a family." And when she said that, my whole life changed. It really turned a corner because I understood exactly what that meant. Maybe I was at the right age to hear it, to understand it, but I was blessed by it because that's when I sort of walked away, and I spent more time communicating with her and asking those questions about my nieces and my nephews, and it became a very, very different journey for me.
Yeah. And then some time after that, that was when you were introduced to meditation and Buddhism?
The Buddhism part started off when I was in a room, and 3 rooms down in the courtroom, and someone, the jury was in the next 3 rooms down. They were trying to decide whether I should have life or death. Should I be executed or not? And my investigator, Melody Ermerchild, brought me this little flimsy newspaper. And inside the newspaper, it had this thing called, you know, a free book saying life in relationship to death, you know. And I just said, well, you know, this is exactly where I'm at, you know. My life is in really, really in a real debate whether I should live or die. So I just wrote, you know, I didn't have nothing else to do. I'm waiting for these people to come out and tell me what was going on. And I was given the death sentence, and at the same time, I received this little pamphlet, Life Relationship to Death. So the person who sent it wrote me a letter, and I wrote this person back, and we wrote back, and I became very, very close to this group of people, Buddhists. And somehow my teacher came to see me, and I sort of just took an empowerment ceremony, and I became a Buddhist, you know. But before that, all that even happened, I had always been doing a lot of writing with my investigator, Melody Ermerchild. And one of the things she did for me was that she concentrated on masculinity. What is a man? Where is your heart at? You know, what do you have to do to prove yourself? And she broke down a lot of walls for me. I found that child within that person, you know, and that it was a nurturing experience because I never knew that there was a child, you know, inside me that that I had not ever known, you know. of course, I had that history that David described, but it was something else. It was something about what I can make of me at the age I was, that I started reading a lot of books on masculinity and what makes a man and blah, blah, blah. And the first story I wrote was a story called Scars. And it talked about all the scars of the people I saw on the exercise yard. I mean, deep gashes of scars, whips, you know. And for the first time, I went up there to these old guys and asked them, well, how did you get this scar, you know? And it was almost a brag that they got these scars because of being tough, you know, like they were badges of honor, you know. And it hit me so hard because it reminded me of the scars I had. And so, you know, returning to the question, that's how I became a Buddhist.
And in one sense, when people think about Buddhism, I remember I have talked with people who have this notion of Buddhism as being something where you stop caring, in a sense. And I think this is a wrong notion, I think. But one thing that you said that I really, I listened to one of your interviews where you said that it became a way for you, that Buddhism became a way for you in fact, even though you originally started meditation and you looked at Buddhism to quiet your mind. In the beginning, that was your purpose. And then after a while, it actually became the opposite. It became about engaging with people around you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It all started with me just sitting down. You know, I didn't have no real agendas, just sitting down with my eyes closed, trying to just figure out, you know, just sit there, just sit in that place, you know. And then I start feeling like, you know, I start, you know, coming up with things that Melody would tell me, you know, some of the books would teach me. And I felt like, you know what, I feel comfortable with giving more to this idea of sitting down, giving more to this idea of meditating. And at first I was just thinking, you know, just sit here, you know, don't do anything. Eat a candy bar, do whatever you want to do, but just sit here. You know, and over years, I felt like I had reason to engage with people and share these ideas about what I am doing, you know. And at first I was scared to even say I was a Buddhist. But over time, I start working with me and I start engaging with people, trying to figure out how we have these connections, but yet we can also have other connections too. So I became a writer in that way, you know.
That should be good. Jarvis?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, here we are. Here we are again. Nothing like, you know, being in the middle of some like deep thoughts about your life and then having the prison say that your time, I mean, maybe it's very, very symbolic and emblematic of what it means to be in a place where you just don't have that freedom, which is why, you know, the extraordinary part of your story is, you know, as you named your book, the first book that you wrote, Finding Freedom, that the challenge of finding freedom in a place where all of your freedoms, the obvious freedoms, are taken away from you. And so if you are in a place where freedom is, where your life is controlled, you know, Jarvis is just like the 750 other inmates on death row, you know, when they wake up, when they can take a shower, when they eat, when they can get out of their cage to go to do the exercise yard, you know, very, very minimally. The challenge becomes, as Jarvis once said, the people on death row for as long as he'd been there either become crazy, you know, they lose their minds, they commit suicide, or they figure something else out. And Jarvis figured something else out, and it was a way to, how do you find freedom? How do you find that freedom inside yourself?
Well, you know what? it's you know, you know, to everyone listening, you know, you evolve, and you know, you go from one place to another, and you know, as years go by, you become a little older, you know, and you become more safer in your own way of thinking. And one of the things I had to do was really, really feel like I was making a difference. I needed to find a way to make a difference. And for so many years, the differences that I was trying to make were not the right decisions. It was influenced by other people. But I got a lot of help from people that I realized were trying to make better me, make me better. And it was just, you know, when I talk about finding freedom, I talk about that journey that started with me sitting down. And it went into me finding that little boy that was inside me that was screaming and yelling and angry and wanting to create all the kind of violence he possibly could. And then it was just me acknowledging these things and saying that was a part of who I am. And when I started to meditate, I started to, you know, not hide from these feelings, but talk about them, write about them, you know, hear them talking back at me. And, you know, you cannot gain this kind of understanding about your life without bouncing it off on people, you know. And when it becomes so raw and so there's nothing fake about it, you get other people to start talking about it, you know. And I said, wow, this is something I can do. You know, this is what my Buddhist practice is. It is not all about sitting down, my eyes closed, you know, giving these mantras, you know, these formal teachings. I've realized that my Buddhism is being engaged. It means walking with people, talking with people, you know, talking people out of being, you know, committing suicide, protecting people who are gay. I mean, all these things found me in my path. I didn't know they were coming, but I just met people in situations where I felt like who I was to my own benefit of helping other people. And when I mean to my own benefit of helping people, I was getting something back from that, you know. I was saying, wow, you are, you know, who you were then is not who you are now, you know. And these were the small affirmations that I was getting that that found the words finding my own freedom, living with the understanding that, you know, you don't have to be outside the prison walls to feel like you're free, you know. And I realized a lot of people outside the prison walls are not free, you know. And at some point, you know, it becomes so obvious to me, it did to me, that, you know, you can be more freer inside a prison, acknowledging that's where you are, than you are outside the prison and not knowing what's going on. So these are little ways that I spent, you know, and got better at, you know, the first 22 years that I was in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement. Let me just say, solitary confinement, so I know what it is 23 hours a day locked in your cell. 23 hours. You get 1 hour a day walking outside. That was solitary confinement, you know.
And let's not forget, and that was 22 years of that. It's incomprehensible to those of us. It's incomprehensible that you survived that.
Well, it's incomprehensible that I survived it too. I mean, because I didn't think it was, if someone would tell me you were going to do 22 years in solitary confinement, I would have flipped out, you know. I would have started screaming at everybody, no. But like I said, you find your freedom. you know, you're capable of finding freedom. And I would say that to a lot of younger people who starting to come to juvenile halls and retention centers and doing all these things, that you can find your freedom, you know, and it doesn't have to be like I found mine. You don't have to be a Buddhist, but you can start writing your mom a little bit more. You can start writing your sister or brother, or if you have a spiritual practice, you can start doing that. And the feedback I get from that was ideas that people actually didn't really contemplate because they were so close to their neighbors. And their neighbors were, you know, either gang members or, you know, people who were just angry. And if that's all you have as a neighbor, then you really don't give yourself a chance. I had those neighbors, and I had them for many, many years. But I also now had a sister I was writing to, and my nieces and nephews, as I was talking about earlier. So it all came to that, you know, that 22 years in solitary confinement found me actually my own freedom. And I matured in solitary confinement, you know, and I became, in many, many ways, I know we know that every being is a human being, but in my way of thinking, I became more human to myself. I was not the animal that I was described to be, you know, and, you know, to take the animal out of you that you think you are and acknowledge being a human being. I know we all believe that we can see ourselves as human beings, but in a place like solitary confinement, you have to really, really find your humanness in a real way. Because if you're stuck as an animal, you tend to act like one, you know, and then you tend to be the best animal you can be. So I was up against all that stuff, and I'm so happy that I had the kind of power to find the right means of surviving. Not everybody do, but very few do. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy with my life. There's some lives out there that I would never want to be, you know. So I'm cool with me, you know. I'm cool. I just need to get out of here. That's all.
I learned lessons from Jarvis over the course of spending time with him. Things that I felt, Jarvis talks about one time when he had to go to the hospital, which meant leaving the prison for the first time in maybe 20 years. And he was in a prison van, and the van got stuck in traffic. And, you know, the prison guards were grumbling and complaining and swearing. It's like, God damn it, they're stuck in bumper to bumper traffic and they're not moving along. Jarvis is in the back of this van and he's looking out the window, and he hadn't been outside of prison for 20 years or whatever it was exactly at that point. And the first thing he said is he saw all these people standing on corners talking to themselves. And he wondered about that. He's wondered how all these schizophrenic people had shown up in the world since he'd been in prison. And of course, one of the guards told him that they were all on their telephones with earbuds. But the bigger point there was that Jarvis was looking inside the windows of these cars, and he was seeing for the first time people outside in his prison, and he was looking inside these people's hearts and imagining what their lives were like. And for me, that was so inspiring to me. And now, ever since I heard that story from Jarvis, it's the kinds of ways that I think people who know Jarvis are inspired. I look at people differently. I'll be standing in line in a post office or in a traffic jam, and I'll look into the faces of these people and realize, you know, that we are connected. We're human beings. Everybody suffers. We all are connected in different ways, and it is the most powerful. And that is about finding freedom wherever you are. And again, it's easy for me to say outside of prison, that I experienced that. But Jarvis also gets letters from people all the time that talks about the fact that they're in prison, and yet they have, you know, the 2-car garage. Their kids they have their children in fancy clothes and going to fancy schools, and yet they're depressed. And you know, he hears from people who are suicidal, and you know, and the question he's asked at some point, you know, are they in prison more than he is in prison? And it's really a mind-bending observation. So glad you're back, Jarvis. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, you know, and not only that. One other story that, you know, there's a story about when I also left the prison. Probably was that same day, that same time, where I was watching everybody talking to themselves, right? And I was like saying, wow, this is, you know, everybody's out here lost their minds, right? I mean, I was look at a car on this, and they were talking, and another car was talking, and I had to ask the guy, I said, why is everyone talking to themselves, you know? And he said, they're not. They're in their own cell phones. They're talking on a phone. I said, really? He said, yeah, they this is how they do it now. You know, you can drive and just, and I was like shocked. I was like blown away. And for the next 10 minutes, I was wondering, for all these miles I've been watching these people, I'm thinking that they have problems, mental problems, and I'm the one that has the problem because I'm over here thinking one way, and the reality is I've been in prison that long. You know, you talk about this a lot, David, because you wrote about it. It's about seeing the guards, you know, seeing the imprisonment of guards. You know, we think that you can be a guard, you can be a death row guard, and you think that, you know, they're going to leave here and be the same, you know, and return to the same person they are when they're not in prison. And that's not the case. That's another thing I do when I look at, you know, the prison guards. I know they leave here not being the same person that they are, and how they treat people. You know, I mean, some of them treat them really, really violently. And I just know if he has a 13, 14-year-old daughter, they are going to suffer from that. I don't need to be somewhere else to be engaged in the lives of other people, like for the benefit of other people. And that's just another way I find my own freedom.
Sorry, I just want to ask you about the title of your other book, That Bird Has My Wings.
Right.
Could you tell me the story behind the title of that book?
Yeah, you know, me and a guy that was, like I said, I was in solitary confinement for all those years. It was probably the 15th year of me being in there. And, you know, it was raining one day, and me and this other guy who's been in there just as long, we were out there, you know, just trying to get out the rain, you know, and this kid who just came into solitary confinement, you know, he picked up this basketball, and there was this seagull just walking around, you know, and he ran over there to us and said, I bet you I can hit this bird with this basketball. Anybody want to bet? And I didn't pay attention to what he was saying. You know, I just saw him as just a kid, you know. And he actually was going to throw the ball. I didn't even think that was what he really thought he was going to do. So he reached back and he's getting ready to throw this basketball. And you can see in his eyes, there's a tinge of anger, you know. And I grabbed his arm, and our arms got locked into each other. And he's saying, "What you're doing?" And my friend who I was standing with jumped in a way and says, "What's going on, man? Y'all don't have to tangle up like this." I said, you know. And my friend asked me, he said, "Why you just got his arm like this?" I said, "Because that bird has my wings. That's why." You know, and we all stared at each other, and I don't know where that came from, and he didn't know where that came from, and the kid who was throwing the ball didn't know where that come from, but we all looked back at that bird, and we just stared at each other, and then back at the bird, and then back at us, and then back at the bird, and the youngster I was talking to that I tangled, he said, "Man, that's some real deep shit you just said." And I said, okay. I kind of gave myself props for that, but that's the story.
Yeah. No,
I know it's also a quick break again. I was going to tell you that Jarvis, Jarvis has a website. A lot of times people meet him, even if it's meeting him by phone, and want to get more information and want to support Jarvis. And I know he's grateful for that. And people who reach out to him and write him all these kinds of things, and all the information is on jarvismasters.org. Wait, is it Jarvis? Before I hang it, is it freejarvis.org?
I can't even.
You know
remember.
what? If you
No,
look,
it's free. It's freejarvis.org. Yeah.
Free Jarvis. Thanks, Ingela.
Okay.
So please, check in there. But Jarvis, if you do have to get off for 1 sec because of the system, just maybe if you call us back, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll call you guys back.
Okay, good.
I guess I'd say in the quick meantime to thank Ingela and Flux for publishing the book in Norwegian. We may not have time to talk about it today, but one of the issues that obviously concerns anybody who has visited death row and is concerned about these issues is the death penalty, and the fact that a country that does not have the death penalty. I was amazed to hear what you just said, that there has not been an execution since, I think you said 1945, when it was a really completely different world. And in our last administration in the US with President Trump, I can't remember exactly how many people were executed, but there were a number of executions. And as I also said, on death row itself in San Quentin, there is, sorry, I'm getting ready for Jarvis to come back.
Yeah.
That there are 750 people waiting to be executed. And even though right now the governor has put a moratorium on executions, they still are on death row, which means that the next governor with a different feeling about the death penalty could reinstate executions. And if you think about research that shows that, just like Jarvis, there are many people on death row, not only in California, but around the country, who are innocent. I think they say something like 3 to 5%. And that's what number is way, way, way low, but they know it's at least that many. So that means that just in San Quentin, if you've got 3 to 5% of people who are innocent, and it's 5 times 7, 35, 50, whatever it is, my brain isn't very good at math, but we're talking about the potential to execute 50 people who are innocent just in this state. Yeah. So the movement to end the death penalty here is strong, but needs to be stronger. And the other thing that Jarvis has pointed out is that some of the people who are working to end the death penalty want just people with death sentences to be commuted to, so they won't be executed, but they'll be put in prison for life. And Jarvis, maybe you can talk about the problems with that, because some people might think that's a much better solution. But as Jarvis can explain, because he knows his own case, but he also knows other people in prison, that putting someone on life in prison is the death penalty, just restated.
Yes, I've been doing a lot of writing on that as of late, because the main group of people who advocate the death penalty are abolitionist people who just don't believe in the death penalty at all. They're very firm, they're committed, they're dedicated, they're just rock solid on the death penalty is evil, it's not right, and that's all they do. But these same people really don't give a lot of money and give a lot of organizational push to anything else. It's only the death penalty. So when someone tells these groups of people, there's an organization called Death Penalty Focus, and we just know if it's only focused on the death penalty, that has their name, their title is perfect. And that's all they do is focus on the death penalty. Well, they don't care about life without the possibility of parole. That is not a part of their thinking process. They just don't want the death penalty. So when the state suggests that we end the death penalty but give everyone life without the possibility of parole, what we're actually saying that we don't put you guys in your cell, the 50 people and just the 700 and some people as well, to be in your cell for the rest of your life, that you will die laying on the floor in your cell at some point.
And what Jarvis has said in the past is that you're not only sentencing the person who's in prison to life without parole, but you're also sentencing their family.
Yeah, you're sentencing everybody. Everybody's gonna live in yourself for the life without the possibility of parole. And I told you, you don't make me happy by giving me a chance to spend the rest of my life inside a 9x4 cell. So being innocent shouldn't be, that response, And a lot of people who's advocating any of the death penalty, they are preferring life without the possibility of parole. And who wants to die in their cell? Who wants to live 20, 30 years and die in themselves if they're innocent? I mean, it's ridiculous to make that kind of compromise when you're still dealing with innocent people. So I've been a strong advocate that's saying if he's innocent, he needs to go home. He doesn't need to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah. So until they take Jarvis's phone, and Jarvis, in case we can't say goodbye because they come grab the phone, I know that people at Flux, I know Ingela, and me, of course, are just so grateful to you for being here and being who you are.
Did you go now?
I think we lost it. See, what happens is the phone, if the picture that is up there on the screen is not Jarvis's cell. They can't take photographs there, of course.
Right.
But this is the day. Oh, he's able to call back.
Great.
This photograph was in a visiting room. So I'm sitting in this room with Jarvis. We visited, hundreds of times over the course of these years, and you see the plexiglass, and it looks kind of light and airy. That's not his cell. Jarvis's cell is much more bleak. It's smaller. It's what happens is the guards come down with the cart. That when they have the allotted time to use the phone, they put the phone through the slot, and then they come back and take it away. So Jarvis, I thought they just did take it away, but it sounds like you still have it for a few minutes.
I still have it. Yeah. Well, they either bring it to you too early or too late.
Okay.
Take it away from me too late. So
Okay.
Until they come get it, I'm here.
Cool.
Okay, so I'll ask you a couple of questions from the audience, Jarvis.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
The first question is from somebody who asks, if you are a mother and you have a child in prison, what kind of advice would you give to the mother?
Wow. That's a good question. The mother, I think the best thing that mother can do is find out as fast as she can what can her child do to better her life, and that would probably be the right kind of books, the visits, to make that connection. Do not break that connection, and both of you will learn how to live in that situation. The worst thing I think would happen is one lives in one way and the other one lives the other way. You need that connection. And yes, that mother should feel like she's in prison because her daughter's in prison. Because the return is the daughter will feel like she's still with her mother. but that connection, do not break that connection. That connection is very, very important.
Yeah. So support to the daughter. The next question is, what will be the first thing you do coming out of prison?
I wanted to stand outside at night, because I've never walked outside at night in 40 years. So I just want to experience what the night is. Really, that's you know, I know that's an odd way of saying it, but that's the truth. I just want to see what night feels like.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing. Jarvis has a teacher who some people may have read some of her books. Jarvis's teacher named Pema Chodron, and she talks about one of the things that she learns when she spends time from Jarvis is to stop and appreciate her own life in a different way. It's like if Jarvis can survive and find meaning and find beauty in the way that he lives, then we all can. And the idea of what Jarvis just said is maybe more profound than it seems on surface until you really think about it, which is to ask yourself, when was the last time at night you stood outside, felt the darkness, appreciated darkness, looked up and seen the stars? That's something that we take for granted, but Jarvis has not been able to do that for 35 years.
Oh, 40.
40 years, sorry. I don't want to make it.
I know, you got to give me all those years. I'm not, they all count.
They all count, for sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of people don't understand that. And, you know, they want me to say, you know, go to a party, or, you know, or go buy some clothes, or go to the beach, or, you know, no, I just want to stand out at night. It's that simple. You know, it's not it's very, very simple, because if you've never seen a night in 40 years, that is a very, very big thing. You know, it's nothing small. The sky is not small, you know. And I think that's the magic of being out. That's the acknowledgement that I'm out, you know. Being with friends, shaking friends' hands, you know, eating cake and drinking soda, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't do it for me. It's just, I'm free. There's this open, dark sky, you know. And that's a powerful thing. I think maybe people have to be here for a long, long, long time to really understand how breathtaking that would be, you know. So that would be my answer. Yeah, it's very simple.
I think in the book,
yeah.
in the book, you say two things. You also say that to turn a doorknob, just to open a door with a doorknob, and to walk on grass. Those are also two things that you were dreaming of.
Yeah. Yes. That is it, to walk where there is no corners, you know. Every 10 feet you turn in a corner. You're going this way or you're going that way. There is no long stretch of anything. And I just want to walk as far as I can without turning a corner, without having to stop.
And one person is asking, how do you find the strength to be so compassionate in your situation?
I think I've seen enough on the other end of that. I've seen the opposite, and I can see in the faces of people, you know, anger. And, you know, I don't want to be like that. When I see someone get real angry, whether it's a guard or whether it's an inmate or whether it's someone you see on television, you get the benefit of seeing what it looks like if you were to become that person. That's one way I look at things. You know, I have that way of thinking or looking at people sometimes and seeing and trying to see, you know, what's going on.
So maybe you can tell us something about the COVID, how COVID hit the prison.
Well, you know, they let COVID die itself out. it became 10 people, 100 people, then it became 200, then it became 300, 400, 500, then it became 1,000. It even became almost 2,000. I mean, it went that way, and there was no way of stopping it. And because I suffer from seizures, I'm on a tier with a lot of people who have, medical conditions, whether they have high blood pressure or, they're diabetics or just everything belongs on the first tier. And the reason why the first tier is because it's quicker to get them to an outside hospital than it would be on any other tier. So a lot of those people died. My neighbor died from it. A guy down the way died from it. I know all these guys. These are the guys I talked to, and they were all dying, and it got so bad they were taking spray paint and they would mark X for the cells that are infected. It became biblical almost. And when I got it, I was very, very sick with it, very, very sick with it. And the doctor gave me, and my whole idea before I even got it, I said, well, if I catch it, I'm going to just let it go through me. I'm not going to try to fight it. I'm just going to let it just go through me. I kind of felt like, this is not just COVID, this is a community, a whole class of human beings who suffer from something. And when I started to do my meditation there, I sat with all these people. I just didn't sit with the people I knew. I sat with a lot of people. And maybe I just psychologically, went there to train myself to make it seem it's not only me, but it was very emotional. It was very emotional.
And now you're on a hunger strike.
I'm on a hunger strike. I'm on a hunger strike because there's three major issues. One is, as we know, that the crime that put me on death row, convicted me falsely. I'm in the process of appealing that my death sentence and my conviction. And with these new attorneys I have, I need to communicate with them, and they're asking me, they're saying that I only can use a state phone, a phone that says you're being recorded and monitored. And I'm saying, I'm not going to use your phone to talk about my case so you guys can hear everything.
Which is illegal. Prisoners have the right to talk to their attorneys in private.
I mean, anywhere in the world, you have a right to talk to you. I mean, even in Guantanamo Bay, you have a right to talk to your attorneys in private. I mean, so for them to do that, and I need to speak with my attorneys, and I just hope people understand how important that is, because if you block me off from my attorneys, how do I win? How do I, it's just. So I'm trying to get the prison to say, hey, cut it out, My attorneys is saying the same thing. They're writing letters and doing their stuff. And so I just need to make a difference. I need, for what I'm doing, this hunger strike, to get outside of San Quentin to the Department of Corrections, the state prison board, and those folks.
That's another Jarvis. I was just going to say that's another. If people want to support Jarvis on his hunger strike and indeed his larger journey, once again, information's on Jarvis Master. I'm sorry, freejarvis.org, and it's first of all, there's a lot of information about his case, a lot of access to his writings, and a way to be helpful in his case, and we are waiting, not patiently, because it's been 40 years. We are waiting not patiently for his exoneration and for him to walk out that door and to be able to see the night.
Yeah. Exactly.
I like the way you said that, David. To see the night.
Well, it's inspired by you, Jarvis, as always.
I really appreciate that.
Well, that's what you said.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I know that I'm just looking, and I know that clock is ticking in terms of the phone.
Yeah, so I want to say that everybody is sending.
One more question.
Yeah, and there's no more questions. Not maybe it's a short one, but I just want to tell you, Jarvis, that everybody's so happy that you could join us and send you a lot of love, and they hope that you, when you're free, that you come to Norway and visit us.
Hey, David.
Yeah, could you hear?
Yeah.
So they're saying, Ingela was saying, all the people who are online, some of the messages you're getting is when everyone's wishing that you're free, and when you are free, that you come to Norway to visit.
And that's so. Thank you guys for the invite. You know, and maybe I would definitely start eating if they let me go today, right now. So you guys know that if they say I can go out there and eat, you know, over there, I would definitely start eating. So,
okay, good.
It's not that serious as it might appear, you know. So, they're coming to get me right. They're coming to get the phone right now. So,
all right, Jarvis, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank everybody for giving me an opportunity to just sit here and talk with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I hope your book make a really, really big difference in the lives of other people, David.
All right, Jarvis, take care. We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Okay, so I know that it's time to sign off, but I just want to thank you so much for having me, and especially for Jarvis, because I always feel what an extraordinary opportunity it is. I know he feels this way, to have a voice outside of San Quentin and to have his voice reach Norway and talk to people there and connect with people there is incredibly meaningful. And so I really do encourage anybody who might be inspired to, write him a letter and send it to him, care of San Quentin, or something through the website, and all the addresses are on there.
Yeah, so the address, if somebody wants to write to Jarvis, they could find information about that on freejarvis.org.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, David. So much.
Okay.
That was so wonderful, and thank you for being on our first live event.
Well, I hope we can do it again. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.